For 600 years, Europe feared an empire whose armies moved like shadows, whose borders expanded like tides, and whose wealth seemed impossible to drain. But what Europe feared most wasn't the swords, the cannons, or even the janissaries. It was something far more invisible. A money system built centuries ahead of its time. A system that weaponized silver, gold, debt, taxation, and human loyalty with almost mathematical precision. Today, we're diving into the Ottoman financial engine, the machine that bankrolled endless wars, controlled 3 continents, and terrified the wealthiest kingdoms in Europe. This is how money built an empire that refused to die. Imagine Europe in the 1500s. Spain is drowning in New World silver. France is fighting itself. The Holy Roman Empire as well, being the Holy Roman Empire, fragmented, political, and broke. Then there's the Ottoman Empire. A state so rich, European ambassadors wrote back home, insisting that the Sultaness vaults looked like the treasury of the world itself. How did they do it? Most people think the Ottomans survived through conquest, but conquest is expensive. Armies must be fed. Horses must be replaced. Warships needed timber, tar, and thousands of men. No empire lasts by spending more than it earns. The Ottomans didn't just conquer lands, they conquered cash flow. Europe worked on a rigid, fragile economic model. Kings controlled the treasury, nobles controlled taxes. The church controlled land, and everyone else prayed they wouldn't starve. But in the Ottoman world, money didn't just flow down from the Sultan. It spread horizontally, through a web of institutions and incentives. The genius of their system came from 3 pillars. 1. A decentralized but loyal tax network timur system. 2. A stable multi-metal currency system, Aki Sultani. Tony. Para 3. A massive credit and charitable wealth engine, Wook system. Combine these 3, and you get an empire that could generate revenue faster than Europe could organize its armies. Let's break it down. To fund wars, Europe drained peasants with heavy taxes. The Ottomans did something entirely different. They didn't tax people higher, they taxed people smarter. The timur system. Instead of paying soldiers in cash, the empire rewarded loyalty with land revenue rights. Timur holders, also called sipahis, were given land not to own but to manage. In return, they collected taxes, locally maintained order, and were obligated to show up to war with fully equipped cavalry. This turned tax collectors into military assets. Europe had unpaid rebellious nobles. The Ottomans had self-financed soldiers. European king needed to raise millions of coins to muster an army. The Ottoman Sultan just sent a message. Sepahis came funded by their own land revenue. It was the world's first scalable, self-financing military system. Now imagine a system that builds schools, maintains roads, feeds the poor, funds hospitals, supports widows, and replaces government spending. That's the Woke, an Islamic charitable trust that operated like a decentralized bank. Rich merchants, judges, soldiers of sultans invested properties into Wokes. These properties generated permanent revenue. That money was then used to fund public institutions. For centuries, Europe had bankrupt kings, where the Ottomans had privately funded public infrastructure. Here's the genius. Because Wuchefs handled the costs of schools, roads, and water systems, the government could channel its own finances straight into the military treasury, the war machine. Europe wondered, how can the Ottomans afford endless campaigns? The answer: the empire outsourced half its expenses to a charitable financial structure that never died. Let's talk currency. For centuries, the Ottomans relied on the Aki, a small silver coin that became the backbone of the empire. Unlike European currencies that constantly collapsed, the Ottomans managed the Aki with careful manipulation. When silver supplies were scarce, they reduced the coin's purity, a controlled devaluation. When trade expanded, they minted more. This wasn't chaos. It was strategy. The empire understood a truth that modern economists preach today: a state must control its currency to control its military. But by the 1500s, something threatened everything: the flood of silver from the Americas. European markets destabilized, prices soared, silver values crashed. Spain unintentionally launched the first global inflation crisis. But the Ottomans, they adapted faster than any kingdom. And that brings us to the money crisis that should have killed the empire when American silver flooded the world. The Aki plunged. The Ottoman economy shook. Soldiers demanded higher pay. Merchants hoarded gold, inflation soared. Europe predicted the empire's collapse. Instead, the Ottomans rebuilt their financial system again. They introduced the Sultani gold coin, the paracopper coin, a triumviral currency system that allowed trade, taxes, and salaries to operate independently. Where Europe had a single point of failure, the Ottomans had redundancy. This flexibility kept the empire alive through the global silver crisis, multiple wars, the rise of Atlantic trade, internal revolts. Europe stared in disbelief. An empire on the brink kept surviving. Work financing. How the Ottomans paid for endless conquests. Let's answer the central question. How did the Ottomans afford 600 years of war? Here's the system in action. Each new region supplied tax revenue, agricultural production, trade routes. Human capital, but conquest alone doesn't fund more conquest. The Ottomans knew this. Convert conquered lands into revenue engines they immediately placed new territories into. The timber system tax gives military obligation, or WAQF networks urban revenue, gives permanent funding. This created a feedback loop. More land gives more tax, gives more soldiers, gives more land. Step 3. Keep cash flow stable with multi-metal currency silver crisis. Use gold. Gold shortage. Use copper.
Market volatility. Adjust taxation ratios.
Where European kingdoms ran deficits, the Ottomans stayed liquid. Leveraged trade like a superpower the empire controlled. The Silk Road, the Mediterranean, the Red Sea, the Balkans, the gateway to Europe and Asia. Trade revenue entered the treasury through customs walks, royal monopolies, urban markets. This wasn't an empire, it was a global toll booth. Europe hated it, feared it, and desperately tried to bypass it. Low age of exploration, Janissaries. The most expensive soldiers in the world, no military unit terrified Europe like the Janissaries. Elite, disciplined, obedient, but also incredibly expensive. A European king could barely pay a standing army of 10,000 men. The Ottomans maintained a full-time salaried professional corps of tens of thousands. Janissaries were paid in Aki stipends, bonuses, war loot, state-funded housing, state-funded food pension like lifetime benefits. This required massive annual funding. How did the empire manage it? Through a system Europe didn't have. Stable taxes, cash flow from WAQF's royal monopolies. Trade, customs, land revenue, controlled currency. The Janissaries weren't just soldiers. They were the empire's most important financial investment. The psychological economics of power. Beyond coins, taxes, and cavalry. The Ottomans wielded a different kind of currency, fear. When European rulers calculated war costs, Ottoman ambassadors exaggerated the empire's financial strength, showcased endless gold horses, cannons, naval fleets. Even when exaggerated, the perception worked. Countries like Hungary, Venice, and Wallachia often preferred paying annual tributes rather than fighting. These payments flowed into the treasury as pure profit. State-funded food pension like lifetime benefits. This required massive annual funding. How did the empire manage it? Through a system Europe didn't have. Stable taxes, cash flow from WAQF's royal monopolies. Trade, customs, land revenue, controlled currency. The Janissaries weren't just soldiers. They were the empire's most important financial investment. The psychological economics of power. Beyond coins, taxes, and cavalry. The Ottomans wielded a different kind of currency, fear. When European rulers calculated war costs, Ottoman ambassadors exaggerated the empire's financial strength, showcased endless gold horses, cannons, naval fleets. Even when exaggerated, the perception worked. Countries like Hungary, Venice, and Wallachia often preferred paying annual tributes rather than fighting. These payments flowed into the treasury as pure profit. The Ottomans mastered psychological economics. If they think you're too rich to fight, they won't fight you. While Europe was terrified, Europe feared the Ottoman military. They feared the Janissaries. They feared the navy. But what they feared most was the money system that made Ottoman power feel endless. Here's what they wrote. 1. The Sultan never runs out of soldiers, because the timber system financed them automatically. 2. The empire cannot go bankrupt, because the Wuchef system sustained society even during war. 3. Their treasury is deeper than all Christian kings combined, because multiple tax channels fed it. 4. They print money without collapsing, because the multi-metal currency absorbed shock. To Europe, Ottoman finances looked supernatural. To today's economists, they look logical. The decline, how the machine finally broke. No system lasts forever. By the 1700s and 1800s, three forces shattered the Ottoman financial engine. 1. The timur system decayed. Timurs were sold, abused, or inherited illegally. The military obligations disappeared. 2. Janissaries became political kingmakers. They demanded higher pay, staged coups, and drained the treasury. 3. Europe industrialized factory-made weapons, made Ottoman cavalry obsolete. 4. Trade routes shifted to the Atlantic. The empire lost control of global trade. The empire didn't collapse overnight, but the money machine that once terrified Europe finally slowed. For 6 centuries, the Ottoman Empire built its power not on brute force, but on a financial system unlike anything Europe had ever seen. Systemware. Taxes created soldiers' charity, built infrastructure, trade, funded the navy, currency flexed with global markets. And wealth flowed through institutions, not kings, while Europe fought wars it could barely afford. The Ottomans engineered a self-funding empire, an empire that bent money to its will, for centuries. If you enjoyed this deep dive into financial history, hit that like button, subscribe for more story-driven economic analysis, and let me know in the comments.